Hello and welcome to Dragons, Unicorns, and Other Creative Creatures. Speaking of creative creatures, I'm here with a very creative creature.
Rona Gofstein, and my creative creature over here is...
Dr. Kevin.
Creative, crazy, Mercury retrograded.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So people...
That supermoon hit, and Mercury retrograde hit simultaneously, and immediately I had computer problems.
Yeah, the supermoon was actually in Mercury retrograde, because you know on my other show, Web of Light, we have the Web of Light astrologer every month do what's coming up for the next sign.
So she warned you?
So she warned us. Though I have spent approximately 3.5 days of working time between Apple support and Dropbox support to try to get my new computer so it stops crashing saying it has no space back and forth. So I've got a little surprise for you.
You do? I love surprises.
I know you do. So I want to ask this question first.
Okay.
Do you celebrate, I know that you are of the Jewish faith.
I am.
Do you celebrate Hanukkah and something to do with Christmas, or you just do Hanukkah?
We just do Hanukkah, and then we do the traditional Jewish celebration of Christmas.
Okay.
Movies and Chinese food.
Ah, okay. So there we go. So I have bought for Dragons and Unicorns a Christmas gift and a Hanukkah gift.
Ooh, goody.
Which we will have access to use on the show.
Yay!
Okay. Are you ready?
As I'll ever be.
Okay, as you'll ever be. This is a surprise. So here is the Hanukkah gift to Dragons, Unicorns, and Other Creative Creatures.
Look! It's a unicorn mug! And it's not too cutesy.
Not too cutesy. I hate the cutesy. I thought it was kind of a Steve-looking. It does have the roses, but I can live with that. So
I like him.
That's the
And
Hanukkah.
her.
There's the Hanukkah gift, so you can have that now to drink your coffee out of from now
because
on
we
the
have
show.
a green screen background in case you guys all haven't noticed, and if I do certain things, my coffee mug disappears magically.
Magically.
I'll show you how else my coffee disappears magically.
That's not so much magic.
That's
honey.
not so much magic. That's necessity. There's a difference.
And
I love this. I love this sort of feathered, winged. Ooh.
And
Don't
this
put this in the dishwasher, boys.
is the Christmas gift I bought for Dragons and Unicorns.
Oh, that's stunning.
There we go.
That's it.
And we can go back and forth. Sometimes I can drink out of unicorns, and you can drink out of
Dragons, absolutely. I love it.
Absolutely.
This is great. So you'll see us now, like Kelly and Ryan on their show.
There we go. Yes, we now have our Dragons and Unicorn mugs. Because as you know, on my Web of Light show, I actually had Web of Light mugs.
Mugs, that's right.
Created, but they're not. I'm not. They're part of the foundation. It's one of the ways that the foundation raises money for the nonprofit.
Yay, nonprofit.
So, yeah.
This is great, though. We should do some. Maybe in the new year we'll do something with our logo. Check us out on Facebook, and you'll see our logo.
Yes. So, anyways.
So thank you. These are great.
Saw those.
You do like the holidays, Mercury retrograde or not. I know you love the holidays. I mean, anybody who has this big a collection of.
Yes. Today, let me see. Let's see if we can do
Woohoo!
this. Ah! You
Hearts
like that?
I love those.
Love those? You know,
great.
hearts and reindeers. We have how I'm feeling right now in this Mercury retrograde about the holidays.
Just totally wrapped up and tangled in your tinsel.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes, I know. I suppose that you could look at it as a form of bondage. This could be a 50 Shades of Christmas
Christmas
shirt.
lights. There you go.
Yeah, 50 Shades of Christmas.
Oy.
So before we introduce today's guest, which we are going to do in a minute, I wanted to give those out to you.
I love these. These are great. I love this one has the dragon on the handle, and this one has sort of
feathers
and like the wing back.
It's angel wings, actually,
it is.
I think.
It's more like the unicorn. It's a sort of unicorn merged with the Pegasus.
Yeah.
Which I like, actually. I like the two together.
So we do want to let people know on Dragons, Unicorns, and Other Creative Creatures that you will see at the end of the show or underneath it an email that you can contact either Rona or I. We are always looking for artists of any and all kinds.
Absolutely.
You know, from fusion glass artists to authors to, we have a very wide variety.
We do. I mean, we have people in fashion and textiles. We've had them in paper and mixed media and
When she says paper, she doesn't actually mean authors.
No, paper artists, actually crafting in paper.
Crafting in paper.
Exactly.
So we are looking to promote and support the arts and to share the artistic journey for other people that are out there.
Absolutely.
But we just always want to let you know, please contact us if you or someone you know and love is an artist of any kind. That includes a food artist.
Oh gosh, yeah,
chefs.
Absolutely.
Of course, they have to bring something for samples.
Yes, please. We're
Our-
actively looking for chocolate and coffee. No, I'm always actively looking for chocolate and coffee.
Well, and I call it, I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to try to pour one from the other for this show. No. But I was kind of, I was, conversation, coffee, and kvetching about the arts. I was thinking that should be our new tagline.
Coffee and kvetching.
So anyways, would you like to introduce today's
I would love
guest?
to, because LJ and I have known each other for 2 or 3 years, I think. LJ Cohen is a Boston area novelist, poet, blogger, ceramic artist, geek, and a relentless optimist, which is really lovely in this day and age, I think. After almost 25 years as a physical therapist, specializing in chronic pain management, LJ now uses her anatomical knowledge and myriad clinical skills to injure characters in her science fiction fantasy novels. When not bringing home strays, which is both canine and human, LJ can be found writing, which looks a lot like daydreaming. But don't disturb her if you see her that way. Welcome to the show, LJ.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be here.
Yay!
There was a conversation that I was eavesdropping on between the two of you as we were setting up this morning. I don't know if that actually qualifies as, because you were in our dressing room.
I was
don't
going to
think
say,
it's
it doesn't
actually-
Fair
qualify as
game,
eavesdropping.
totally fair game.
Yes.
Fair game, yeah.
It
I
is
wasn't
fair
actually
game.
eavesdropping. And, obviously I want to talk a little bit about where your ideas come from and what and kind of what your artistic process is. But I heard you talking and about the fact that your husband doesn't always recognize when you're doing creativeness. And you said daydreaming at the end, and I thought, that's very true, I think, of all of us creatives, that if we're not with somebody who's creative, they don't always get when we're working.
His creativity is very much more of a driven sort of creativity. So he's always doing something.
Well, you said he has a hummingbird-like energy.
He does. He has hummingbird energy. He never, ever stops. So he just quietly goes and does all the things. And when I work, I sit and think a lot and sort of stare into space. And it takes him a long time to realize that I'm actually working and engaged in something. And once he understands that, he's like, oh, sorry. And he's extraordinarily supportive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got the feeling he was supportive in the
Oh, yeah,
conversation. I
absolutely.
didn't want to.
But it can be
We're
utterly
suggesting otherwise.
It can be utterly exhausting being with someone like that because he's always doing something.
Hummingbird.
You are a bit of a hummingbird, yes.
I'm definitely, well, of course, the original comparison is you have hummingbird and then you have elephant people. And hummingbird, and the elephant is
Slowly but surely.
slowly but surely.
I've been called hummingbird because, as somebody once pointed out to me, I'm also one of those people who nobody realizes how fast and how much I have to do to make it all look very pretty and
Yes.
smooth and in truth. That and the fact that, hummingbirds love sweets.
Oh, there you
They
go.
do. They love sugaries and
and-
flowers, and I'm that too. So
I had a great collection of hummingbird feeders at my house in Phoenix when I lived there. And
I love them.
everybody said, oh, you don't get hummingbirds in Phoenix. And, blah, blah, blah.
you can
And
get them anywhere, I think.
I had a ton of hummingbirds that
Yeah.
would come and visit me. People, how do you get hummingbirds come and visit you? And I go, because I put the right thing in the feeder, and they like sweets, and I'm sweet, so they come.
There you go. There you go.
That's what it takes.
But, one of the things I thought of when you had that conversation and we started is because, I've run my own business for 28 years, and my creativity is part of my business, but I have other significant parts of the business. And so there have been different times when I've had different levels of staffing. And I had an office manager once, and I would try to say to her, if I'm sitting there at my desk and you need to talk about something, just come and say, is now a good time? She'd come in and she'd just start talking. And she'd be like, and she'd be like, well, you weren't doing anything. And I'm like, no, I was like planning the next release of the sales funnel, or I was doing something, stuff like this. Or she'd say, well, it looked like you were just sitting there playing a game. And I'm like, I'm sitting there figuring something out, and I might be on a game, and I don't play a lot of computer games, but I might, because sometimes, especially if you have hummingbird energy,
Yeah.
you
It has to be something.
You have to be doing 2 or 3 things.
Yeah.
Goes with my ADD thing.
Oh, God, I don't know if you've experienced this, because you have children too. In my 3rd trimester of pregnancy, I can only hold one thought at a time. It's a very weird sensation, and I mentioned it to Mark, my husband. I said, it's really weird. I'm only holding one thought at a time. I can do one thing, and then the next thought comes in. He goes, oh, that's pretty much what it's like to be a man, for the most part. I grabbed him by the shoulder. I'm like, how do you live like this? I'm a 30 tab on the internet thing open at all times. If my Google crashes, it literally right now has 21 tabs open.
Oh,
it says
Lordy.
to restore. And Ethan, my older son, will look at it and go, really? 21 tabs. What are you doing with them all? They're just there. I need them later.
Yeah.
I can't do them now.
I've been really struggling to focus on one thing at a time.
It's hard.
But I know that I get more done when I can do that.
Yeah.
Well,
For the most part, I mean, yes, if I'm distracted and my brain is in too many things, the one thing that I really do want to get done either takes longer or doesn't quite get done at the level I want. So I'm trying. I agree.
I think it depends on how you set it up. And of course, this is kicking in my ADD stuff, because I'm an ADD poster child, besides all the books I wrote on it. And I think that there is productive multitasking and
Yes.
not productive
Yes.
multitasking. And the thing is to recognize the difference, because I 30, it's 30 plus
Murder
tabs.
years.
30 plus,
Oh,
30
oh,
plus tabs on my
yeah.
computer.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll have Firefox open, Chrome, and Safari, and they'll all be doing different things. And I have the second computer over here, I have the iPad here, and I have the 2 iPhones.
Whoa.
It is amazing our brains don't leak out our ears sometimes.
But I can grab something and go, okay, this needs to set for a second, and I just need to leave it here, and I'm going to figure this out. Boom. Oh, got it. Oh, okay, yep, and I can do that. And that's how I set it up. And my dream, I don't have my dream office right now, but my dream office would be a circle that I could step in the middle of and have my stuff all the way around.
You need a chair on wheels, too.
You need the computer setup that Ro has in the story.
So Ro is she our first
Yay, wonderful
heroine?
segue.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So we have LJ Cohen and Derelict. So tell us a little bit about Ro and Derelict, and is she me in female drag?
Well,
So you obviously have
I don't
some things in
know.
common.
So I described Derelict as Firefly meets Lost in Space.
Ooh, I like 'em both.
Complete with very confused artificial intelligence that
Danger,
runs
Will
a
Robinson.
spaceship. Well, it's not evil, it's just confused. It was damaged in the war 40 years ago, so it was crash landed on an asteroid, and then they just built a space station around it and used it for storage. And Ro and her friends inadvertently wake it up, and it still thinks the war is going on. So it's not evil. It's not like Hal in 2001, and it's not really trying to hurt them, but it kind of sort of is trying to kill them because it's a little confused.
So you have a computer with PTSD.
Yes, yes I do. Yes, I do. And,
Well, that's-
Ro and her accidental crewmates, they're not even friends at the beginning of the story. They just all happen to be on this ship that is a storage unit when it takes off with them. And so they have to essentially figure out how to heal this AI in order to find their way home again.
Which means they also have to figure
So
out
I
how
get
to
the
work
Firefly,
together.
and
Yes.
now I get the Firefly and Lost in Space.
And so they have to figure out how to
combination.
communicate. And Ro is a computer programmer, hacker, sort of extraordinaire, and she has this. She works in this three-dimensional space where she sort of pulls up these virtual windows all around her, and then sort of go from one to the other and do all this crazy kind
yeah,
of
you would
hacking
like that.
stuff. But in fact, the character in the story who is the one who is able to communicate with the computer is the one who is not techie at all. He's a musician. And he has a neural implant, which he uses to create his music. And he's able to directly connect to the computer and create a musical language that the computer can communicate in. And that comes right out of my rehab background. And there's a lot of evidence for using music to communicate with certain brain disorders.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I saw an amazing video of that they put headphones on Alzheimer's patients and played them the tunes of their youth.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, the visual, the physical change was
So
extraordinary.
there's a lot of evidence in they use music with Parkinson's patients that they have trouble. They have what's called fascinating movement. They have trouble initiating movement. But
Yes,
if
I
you
remember
give
that,
them
my grandfather.
music, they can move fluidly with the music.
Yep.
I love that.
So that's sort of where the genesis of that came from. But Ro is sort of the main character in this story. Her arc is the main arc. And then as the books progress, although all the characters are in all of the books, each book has a main character arc, which is with a different character.
Okay,
So do they have a different POV character or main POV
They're
character?
all there's multiple POVs.
In
There's
all the books?
All the books.
Points of
Okay.
view, by the way,
Yeah, I
I'm
was gonna
slipping
say,
between.
let's-
I say POV, like some people say ADD. So
Right.
POV is point of view. That's when you're in the head of, or hearing the thoughts usually of a character.
instead of omniscient.
So
Right,
in
which
a
is a
way,
camera angle.
when I'm writing these stories, I have those Chrome tabs open, but they're in my head, and they're all the different characters.
Yep, absolutely.
Does anybody ever do you ever have like the one character front and center, and from another tab you start hearing voices? Come, don't, yoo-hoo, I have something that,
They don't always talk to me, but they talk to each other, and if I'm lucky enough, I get to eavesdrop.
Yeah.
But there's always a
so
multitude
get
back
that.
there, and it's busy. It's very busy.
Absolutely. And
Oh, and there's that character that you on Ithaca Rising.
oh, let's bring up the second
Okay,
one
so
for
there's
our viewers.
he is that's Bear, and he's the musician.
okay, so he's the musician. Okay, so there's 4 books in the series.
So far.
Soon to be 5. I'm
Soon.
working on 5.
Okay. And so, okay, so yeah, we'll go through. So this is the musician with the implant, which I find fascinating because I've done work with music in my private practice, working with people at times.
Now, that's not
and
the
at one
typical
point it
spelling of Ithaca. So is that a place? Is that a
That is
person?
the spelling of Ithaca from the Greek mythology.
Oh, okay.
And there
That's right, they don't have C's really.
and
same way.
in that book, Ithaca is a place in
Okay.
the story. And in a lot of ways, every book has some sort of echo in Greek mythology. It's not quite as overt as the Rick Riordan books. I'm not actually rewriting Greek myths. But so the spaceship's name is Halcyon. The
Yes.
space station is Daedalus. There's another ship called Hephaestus. There's Ithaca. The Ithaca Rising book is, in a way, a reimagining of the Orpheus myth, except it's a brother rescuing a brother rather than a husband and a wife. So Bear, who's the brother, has to go challenge the underworld for his brother's freedom, essentially,
Oh.
to find his brother. So, there's some of those echoes, and that's why Ithaca is spelled that way.
There we go.
Interesting. Now, in developing this, because we've had this conversation in the show before, because I've done some science fiction and some fantasy fiction as well.
And you've done series, which is an amazing thing
Yeah.
to be able to create.
Yeah, and people sometimes laugh at me because I'll give my characters astrology charts.
I do. You give them a birth date, therefore they've got a zodiac sign
Yeah,
and
yeah,
a temperament.
yeah.
And
Yeah, well, but you have to do the whole chart. But anyways, but how much of the world did you create? Did you create the world as you went along, or did you create it all at the beginning? Tell us about the creation of the world that
So-
this exists in.
Everything I write starts from a very sort of small nugget. And I always describe it as the clue version of writing. So it's not Colonel Mustard in the drawing room with the candlestick. It's a character in a place with a problem. And every single one of my stories starts with just that triad, right?
I like that. I don't mean to interrupt, but for our viewers, I want you to catch that. A character in a place with a problem. For those of you who've been thinking you want to write, this is a great way to a character in a place with a problem.
And
I
if
love it.
you look at those as the three-legged stool analogy, right? So the character gives you the temperament, the connections, their universe. So that character doesn't live in isolation, and so I then build all of the characters around that character. The problem is the conflict, and so I'm building what the characters need and want and what we're going to withhold from them to drive them to get it. And then the problem, and then the place is the setting, so that's the world. So where is this character, and how does the world inform who they are and their choices? And so it's almost as if it starts here, and then it builds in concentric rings around those three areas. And so I build the world as I have a need for building the world.
Okay.
So you're character driven.
Extraordinarily character-driven.
Extraordinarily character driven, yes.
Now, are all of your characters human?
Oh, there's a question you don't get to ask people every
That's
day.
a really good question. In this series, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because sometimes part of creating place is if you're going to have non-human characters, then you have to have
Although the AIs are characters too. They're not point of view characters, but they have sentience and they have personalities.
Yeah.
And they're interacting with your
And they're
point of view.
interacting with my point of view characters. But we're not in a world where there are aliens. This is a human-driven diaspora.
Okay. Okay. And some of it is because, again, we have people that watch the show that want to be writers or want to, and say, well, how do I get started? Where do I go? What do I do? And everybody's different.
Everybody's
Absolutely.
different.
And that's
And
why I
wherever
like
you want to
people
start
share.
is right.
Right.
Yeah.
This is just a process, because if there was only one way, there would only be one how to write book in the bookstore, and there's an entire section.
Yeah.
So clearly, there's not only one way to write a book.
Okay.
There's not even, and I don't know if you've experienced it, but I don't think I've ever written the same way from one book to the next.
No.
My process flows. I try to stay open to different kinds of doing things. I have a basic process that's worked for me. I've written 14 novels in the past 15 years. So
That's impressive.
many of which you will never see. You're welcome.
For those who don't know about it, those who know it's trunk books, the ones that just, or drawer books, are just kept in a trunk somewhere that, yes, you're welcome, you'll never see them.
I have a file on my computer.
Yes.
My first novel was a almost 200,000 word behemoth, which had every fantasy cliche known to man and done badly.
Ooh,
Oh yeah.
all right. And the kitchen sink.
Every once in a while, I'll pull out an excerpt and throw it up on my blog just to say, look, you could start here. And
You could be this
you could
bad.
be this bad.
And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a great thing. It's a fun thing as a writer to look back and as any kind of artist to look back and say, this is where I was, this is how and who I created at the time. I'm back to doing that again myself. This year I had a 3-book series release, and the first had been released before. And after 5+ years, I went back, redid it, and expanded it. I'm doing that again with another book. It's a weird process to kind of look back and go, ooh, that was good then, but it's not good now.
Well, our work matures as we do.
It does.
Yes, and I am now, so I started writing the first book in the series, Derelict, 6 or 7 years ago. And it's tempting all these years on to go back and rewrite it. But I also promised myself that it's done. It was good. It is.
As
it
good.
still stands, right?
There you go.
There's no fatal flaw in the book. There were things I would do differently today, but that's the book I wrote at the time I wrote it, and I needed to be honest with that and not continually go back. So it's always sort of keep moving forward.
And I'm with you. And I'm especially that way about my poetry, because I know you were a poet as well.
Yes.
That when I read a poetry I wrote in 1976,
You were a different person then.
I was a different
So
person.
you're time
Yeah.
traveling.
and so I'm keeping that
Ooh,
forward, and I'm
it's
not,
time
I'm not trying to bring that forward. But even in my novels, it's like, okay, yeah. I mean, now in my books, like my ADD books, if there's a new updated
Right,
piece of
that's a
information.
different, that's a
Yep.
whole different ballgame.
Yeah, that's a different ball game. Yeah, but so I agree. I'm full. I'm full on.
Look
with you.
forward.
Look forward. Learn from the past. read it.
Incorporate it into the next
Next
one,
one.
make the next one better.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am still proud of all the books.
What is an interesting thing that I've seen that's happened to some of my my favorite authors who have now had a long history, is what they'll do is, like David Eddings or Raymond Feist or people like that, is they'll release a book that puts back in everything that their editor made them cut out.
The director's cut.
Yes,
director's
it's
cut.
the writer's version.
Yeah, and that's a different story. I mean, is there a director's cut of Derelict somewhere where your first editor said, okay, it's a great book, but it's too big, or you can't have 200,000 words?
That's a really interesting. I don't think there is a director's cut. There might be things I would add now, having gone deeper into the series, sort of more foreshadowing.
Yeah. Well, but that's changing the book.
Yeah.
But if you look and you go, because I'm a bit of hoarder's the wrong word, but I'm a hoarder with my stuff, with my writing, my IP. I don't ever completely delete
No.
anything or throw anything away.
There's a save file.
Yeah.
There's
save
a
file.
flash drive. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's always something somewhere. And, in any of your books, if you went back and said, I cut that chapter out, but now as I've moved forward, I would put that chapter back in. That's not changing the book.
Right.
That's,
Sometimes
Right.
I will repurpose
Oh, yeah.
things that end up getting cut, and then I'll repurpose them and use them in a later place. Like, oh, that could have worked here, but you know what? It works so much better here.
yep,
So I've definitely done that.
yeah.
And I'm saving backstory for interstitial short stories that happen before, during, after the series.
When I did my science fiction, and Rona's heard this before, but I did 100 pages of backstory before I wrote the first words, creating the different races and what were their religions and what were their stuff. And I have this, and David Eddings did that with the Rivian Codex for his Belgariad and the Lorien series. Is that he had the Rivian Codex and all the stuff that he wrote so that he could make sure that he didn't go out of integrity with his world.
Oh, yeah.
I have a wiki that I keep. It's only on my computer. It's not published, but it absolutely, the deeper you get into a series, it's like, oh hell, did I ever give that character a first name in book 2? Crap. And I'm like going through the wiki. Oh yeah, I did give him a first name. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because there is going to be that one reader that says, well, he was David in that book, and you have him as Clyde. Wait.
Is it the same person? Well, and let's face it, fantasy fiction and science fiction draw more geek-like readers that will catch that than romance.
Yeah, they do. The ones who catch those details in romance specifically tend to be the
historical readers.
And within historical, the Regency readers, they love detail. And if you change the color of her police from one thing to the next, they won't notice.
You want to stay internally consistent, and I really do strive for that as much as possible. And I also have an editor who is utterly brutal in all the right ways.
Oh,
so
those are
she
good.
will absolutely nail me on continuity stuff, which is great.
And we should at some point reach out to one of your editors or one of your editors. We should get some editors on this show because they have their own version of a creative process.
They do.
So my editor, her name is Karen Conlon, and she lives in Wisconsin, I believe.
Yeah.
Just the internet allows us to be distributed. So during one of my edits with her, not for one of these books, but for a different book, she discovered what she saw as a rhythmic sort of tick of mine in sentence construction.
Interesting. That's a good editor.
And so she called it a wildebeest. She said, one wildebeest walking across the savannah is fine, but when you have an entire herd of wildebeests, that's a problem. So she got to the point where she would just in the margin write wildebeest. And I would know exactly what I needed to do to change that rhythmic structure.
And we don't realize we have it. I mean, part of it goes with voice, with our writing voice. It makes it distinctive. How you can tell, just as you can tell an artist's music from a certain sound, there is a way with writers too. But there are ticks that don't work. I find if I discover a series that's already 4 books in, and I start with book 1. If I read 1, 2, 3, 4, I will notice the ticks by about book 3 at the latest, but usually around 2. Certain phrases, certain.
One of the things that drives me crazy is if I read a line, because I love series. I love series. If I read the first book and I like it, then I'm like, I want to read
He's committed.
all of them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so is when I read something 2 or 3 books in and I look at it and I go, why is that character saying that? And then I look back and realize it's a different character saying it, but I'm hearing it in the character's voice because they've lost the ability to differentiate the voices enough that when you hear the line, you go, well, wait a second, she wouldn't have said that. He would have said that, but she wouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Unless she's mocking him, making fun.
Yeah, that is problematic.
Yeah.
That actually may be, and I've been told that's probably one of my biggest strengths as a writer, is my characters all sound different.
Yes.
My dialogue is my strength. And the thing that I've struggled with most in my writing is visual description.
I had one of my editors in the science fiction, the book, and they said, this is great, except you're writing a science fiction book and you talk about this area and you haven't described it at all.
Yeah,
and,
I have to
and
say that's usually
there needs to be something. And I sat down and literally 12 hours later, I had like a 5-page description interactive with stuff. And he looked at it and he said, now you've done like twice as much as
Now
you
you
needed
need to cut it back.
No, but he actually said, but he left it all because he said,
Yeah.
but your science fiction will love it. You didn't have to go this
Right.
far,
Right,
but
but they want-
but it
they're
won't be too
happy
far
to.
for them.
So a really
true.
interesting thing that I discovered about myself just about a year ago. I read an article in the New York Times on something called aphantasia, which is a non-functioning mind's eye, okay? So if somebody says, close your eyes and visualize a beach, can you do that?
Yes.
You see the beach, you see the sand? That to me seems so bizarre. It's like, I think you must be hallucinating. Like, why would you see anything when you closed your eyes? I close my eyes and I see static. I don't see anything. I don't visualize anything.
Okay.
And so when people would say, well, you know, I just write the movie that reels in my head, I thought that was an extended metaphor.
Yeah.
Which means so for you, creating the visual, it has to be very actively done. You have to stop
Yes.
and...
Yes, and so I remember my first critique group, they said, you know, I really love the story and your characters, but you're writing floating heads in black boxes. I don't know
There's a
what
visual.
anybody looks like, and I don't know where they are.
Well, you know, one of the...
Don't know what anybody looks like, and I don't know where they are.
And so I then had to realize that, oh, visual description's actually important to people. Huh,
It anchors
that's
them.
weird.
Yeah. Well, and because my practice is spiritually based and I do visualizations and I do meditations and I do stuff for people. I have people who say, I can't see. And I
Right.
said, then no.
Right.
No. You can know it.
Yeah.
And the other thing you can do, which probably you've already figured out, is if you look around, is you just either search for images or you search for spaces and you go,
YouTube is brilliant for that.
yeah, and you bring it
Oh,
up
there
and you
you
go,
go.
okay, I can describe that because I can see it. Now it's outside of
can
me.
see it, yeah.
Now I can do it. Let's go on to Dreadnought because I want to make sure we
Oh,
cover all
sure.
four
So
books.
Dreadnought I describe as female MacGyver in space.
Ooh.
So the character on the cover is Dev, and she is a materials science student at university. And her hobby growing up was poking around in the abandoned post-sea level rise flooded environments. So she does sort of urban archaeology. And she's extraordinarily capable because she's had a very hard Scrabble life. She has lived in one of the post-flood settlements that have now become permanent shanty towns
Ooh,
all
charming.
over America and the world. And so Dev gets kidnapped early in the story, and she basically has to MacGyver her way in this spaceship to rescue herself.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned before we started that you love your cover artist, and I have to say this, given your description and that image, it's perfect. Because she looks capable, she looks strong, she
Yeah.
looks, you know.
Intense and focused.
Yes.
Oh, that is Dev.
Yep, intense and focused. Now, Are there any characters in your book over the age of 30?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. Because
Oh, yeah.
so far they've all been pretty
The-
20-something sounding.
So most of the point of view protagonists are emerging adults.
Okay.
But, and if you look at Parallax cover, that is Lieutenant Commander Emmeline Gutierrez. And she's in
older.
her 60s.
Okay.
She lost her arm in the war 40 years ago. And she makes a deliberate choice, and it is a plot point in one of the books, I can't remember which, it probably is book 2, where she talks about deliberately getting a primitive-looking prosthesis instead of one that's indistinguishable from her other hand, as a reminder for what she sacrificed so that the other people in the story can live the life that they live. She
Never forget.
It's a badge of honor.
She is fierce, and don't cross her.
Unforgiving.
She has a little General Leia from the start thing going for me.
Maybe.
Yeah, see, and I can see where you say that, but I look at her and I see her with a tendency of being unforgiving and judgmental.
She is.
Yeah.
She is. But she has had to sacrifice more than anybody appreciates. And yeah, oh yeah.
And sometimes you can't appreciate it. I mean, if you didn't live through it, and there's a point.
Yeah, I love her character to pieces. I think she is a brilliant person. And one of the lovely things in that story was at the end of the story, before her prosthesis gets fairly significantly damaged, and she ends up working as a team with the younger brother of the musician. So the younger brother's name is Jem. He's 12.
So he got saved.
Yay.
Oh, yeah.
He's 12.
Spoiler.
And
12. Oh my gosh.
yes, he's 12. And he's got very small hands, and he's very capable. And so she enlists him to help her repair her prosthetic. And the relationship between the two of them, it's one of the only places where Gutierrez can be kind, right? And patient. And so you see a very different side of her when she works with Jem than you see when she is the lieutenant commander. So
I like that. That's great, because now you have this really fully fleshed out character who's not just her past.
And Jem is an interesting character in that at the end of book 1, actually not even at the middle, very early part of book 1, he sustains a head injury. And because I was a clinician for 25 years, the consequences of his head injury continue through all of the books. And they're very realistic. So there's no magical, all of a sudden he gets cured and he's all fine. He's better, but he's not the way he was. And that's one of my major pet peeves when I read anything, is if it doesn't have a reason to exist and it doesn't have consequences, it doesn't belong in the book.
And there's got to be a consistency of a realism, or you lose connection with the character.
Yeah.
The character doesn't feel real anymore.
Yeah.
Well, so if suddenly he has no evidence of the head trauma in book 2, you go, what happened?
What happened, right.
What happened to
Right.
that?
And there shouldn't be a convenient, magical cure,
Well, that's why you write fantasy, though. Sometimes you can throw one in.
Well, you can, if you really need
There's still going to be a plot point.
There's
Yep,
still a
yep.
cost, right?
There's always a
Yes.
cost. So I know we want to move on to one of your other creativities, but I have to ask this question, which is, now, have you ever thought of doing any kind of script writing?
I haven't, but I've had people tell me that that might be something that I would be good at.
One of the things is, and my primary practice for the last 28 years now, 28 years next month, has been as a spiritual coach, counselor, and catalyst, and working with people. And so when you were talking about your dialogue and the distinguishability, when I had a movie script that was being reviewed by somebody, there was plenty wrong with it, but one of the things they said is, you create the most distinctive characters. I never confused one of your characters with anybody else. And,
Which is something actors love.
and
Yes.
he, and this guy said, about the dialogue, and he goes, this is something that they don't get, that a lot of people struggle with. And so hearing you say that, I pass on to you that
Someday.
doing really distinctive dialogue is something that there is a real need of for both the stage and for the.
And in fact, when I do draft, I scaffold the story. I scaffold a scene with primarily dialogue, and then I layer everything else back in.
Yeah.
But that's what sort of gets the scene
Moving.
drafted for me
There you
is,
go.
is dialogue.
And I'm the same way. I'll do the dialogue. I mean, it's the dialogue first. It's
Yeah,
the dialogue that's most
dialogue
important,
first.
and to hop into, okay, now I'm this character.
Right.
I'm literally playing all the characters, which was Rona's dream with why
I
she
know.
became a writer.
That's
when
what I
wanted,
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I was a kid and wanted to be an actor, I wanted all the parts. So now I'm a writer. I get all
You
the
get
parts.
to have all the
That's-
parts.
the parts.
Okay, so now this is one of the very unique drinking mugs that they have in the series.
Nah, not quite.
Tell us why this is on our
Speaking
screen.
of dragon scales, it
So
does
this
have
is my
that.
other passion. So I am not what I would consider an artistic person, and that I think makes sense knowing that I don't visualize. So it's very hard to draw and paint and do 2D art if you don't visualize. So all of my life I was told I was not an artist, and so I never did anything other than the writing for me was my outlet. But when my now 21-year-old son started middle school, he wanted to continue with the ceramics class that he'd been doing, and the only one they had was an evening class that was a parent-teen class. So
Oh.
he begged me, could I be his +1? I'm like, yeah, I've never done ceramics, whatever. I fell in love with it. He went on to find music, and he stopped doing ceramics, and I've never left.
That's
So it's the perfect skill for someone who's kinesthetic.
Yes, yes, and you know it's a sign. Your kinesthetic approach is why you do the scaffolding and you do the dialogue.
Yes.
Because there's a kinesthetic
Right.
activity.
I
to
inhabit the characters as
Yeah.
I'm writing. So if you watch me
called
writing,
possession.
I constantly, I'm like doing all these things, walking around, moving around.
Yep, yep.
But I do,
I have a post book exorcism.
but I do ceramics as my hobby, and it's going back to sort of the ADHD thing.
Yep.
It's one of those places where if you're not fully engaged and present, it's not happening. If you are not centered, your clay will not be centered on the wheel, and you'll start to pull up the
interesting.
walls, and you will make a cow plop.
Well, and this is that hyperfocus because you know ADD and ADHD
Yes.
people either hyperfocus or multitask.
Right.
But when you get them into hyperfocus,
It's a, yeah.
And so
beautiful things appear.
So I do both wheel throwing, which is that. So that appeals to my symmetry. And then I do the hand building, which was the picture you showed beforehand, which appeals to my wonky sense of wonkiness. So I actually brought, these are little mini dragon bellies.
Oh.
So I brought one for each of you. You guys can choose which one you like.
These are so
And,
good.
and
you.
you can
These.
use them as tea bag holders or shot glasses. They're quite generous, though, so do be aware.
If it's a shot
If
glass.
it's a shot glass.
That's a
That's
good.
about the right size for me.
When
I'm not
Mercury
judging,
Is, when
not
Mercury is
judging.
retrograde,
Not judging.
go for the extra large shot glass.
And so
These are
I make
beautiful.
those, and I love the fact that they've got these little tripod feet because they look like they're about to walk off the table, right?
Yes.
And they've got this sort of bellies. And a dear friend of mine who is actually a wonderful thing maker, she is a writer
thing
and
maker.
an artist. She does calligraphy and circular Gallifreyan.
Ooh.
So I'm dying to have her design my next tattoo. So.
Uh,
And she also does like lace. She does crochet and lace and stuff. So she saw these and she said, they look like dragon bellies.
They do look like,
So that's why I call my ceramics life is Dragon Belly Ceramics.
oh, nice.
That's a good name.
And of course, coming on Dragons and Unicorns and Other
There you
Creative Creatures
go.
was
There
the
we
perfect
go.
match.
And mostly I make ceramics to make them and to give them away. I do a few art shows. I don't do a whole lot of selling, only because, number one, it's kind of like my work is my writing. I don't want to bring that work focus to my
It's a different
ceramics
feeling
too.
Yeah.
when you have, you
And-
need that thing that's creative that has nothing
And people
else.
are like, well, you should have an Etsy shop. I don't like shipping ceramics.
blame me.
It's
No.
ridiculously expensive, so I'd have to charge so much
Prohibitively
more,
almost, yeah.
and you get breakage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't replace it.
You can't replace it.
No.
So for me, it's more like I'd like to give them away or trade. I do a lot of art trades.
Yeah. So we want to thank LJ Cohen.
Sorry.
So
No,
no.
Our viewers know this happens every
Is
time.
how it happens. The time
Every
goes
time.
and it goes very quickly. We want to thank you for coming on. We want to thank
my
you for our
pleasure.
dragon bellies, which I'm going to continue to leave on our tables, and the derelict, the Halcyon
Halcyon
series.
Space series,
You
yep.
will see at the end of the show and underneath her how to look her up, how to check her out, how to get more information on the books. But thank you so much for
It
coming.
was my pleasure. Thank you. It went so fast.
It does.
I know. As we wrap up today's Dragons, Unicorns, and Other Creative Creatures, don't let somebody else judge your creativeness, because they may not identify it in their concept of creative. Their concept is irrelevant. We are all creative. We were all born to create, co-create, recreate. We are creators. Whether we create in writing, or we create in dragon bellies, ceramics, or we just create in creative problem solving, it is still an aspect of creativity. So if anyone ever told you that you weren't creative, tell them that their lack of creativity is showing because they can't see your creativity.
Nice.
Namaste.